We're now being joined in the studio by Lisa and John from Lifeline, who have come in to chat to us about everything Lifeline. Welcome to the Phatt, John and Lisa.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Brett.
I'll just turn your microphone up a little bit so that people can hear. There's no point having you here if no one can hear you.
I've never heard anyone say that about me before, as Keith would attest to. Very rarely do people say they can't hear me.
Yes. So, Lifeline, there's a couple of aspects to this. Obviously, we've got a gig coming up tomorrow night, a comedy gig. But let's get into the nuts and bolts of what Lifeline actually is, first of all, and how important a role it plays in our community. Lisa?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. That's always a difficult question to answer. It's a bit of a...
I thought I'd give you an easy one.
It's a bit of a catch-22. Our Lifeline Loddon Mallee is one of 41 Lifeline centres around Australia, so we form part of the national 13, 11, 14 network. And locally in Loddon Mallee, we have two call centres, one in Bendigo and one in Mildura. And last year we answered 22,000 calls.
Wow.
From a national hotline. We have almost 100 volunteers across our two sites who are trained and accredited to deliver crisis support. So, I guess people say to me, I hope you're not busy, Lisa, because, of course, 22,000 calls is a lot. But at the same time, if we weren't there to provide that support for people who are in crisis or experiencing mental health distress, that might then escalate to a far more sad situation. Yeah. So we're, and in addition to the 13, 11, 14, which is the core of what we do, we're really trying to roll out more community-related programs so that we can support the community in other ways, so that communities got the resilience and support people in the community who can help people who are experiencing crisis long before they get to thoughts of suicide. And so we're rolling out things like training, face-to-face counselling, critical incident support. All of those things help us do our work of aiming for a suicide-free Australia. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that. You're talking about creating that resilience. We had food sharing, was it last week, week before, also talking that these community services have gone from just being reactive to being proactive, which I think is really important, that you're actually out there educating and assisting so you don't get to that point where you need to call Lifeline.
Yeah, that's right. Michelle and the team at Food Share do an amazing job, and we collaborate with lots of the local not-for-profits like Food Share. But that's the thing, we're what you would call a fairly small not-for-profit, and we've got really limited resources, but the whole focus is obviously 13, 11, 14 is core to what we do, and that will never change, and we always want that to be available to people 24/7. But definitely there's been a shift in our strategy from our board and from what we're hearing in the community to start to provide services so we can be more proactive and not reactive. Often when you've got limited resources, you can only react to what's happening in the moment. And we're not there yet, but we're working towards it. And certainly what we're hearing from communities, people want the skills to be able to support people, particularly in our really rural and satellite style communities. Think Charlton, Board, Inglewood, places like this where we have got smaller populations and more limited services. Can they call 13, 11, 14? Absolutely they can. But also we want people with skills in the community, so that if someone says, yes, I'm struggling, yes, I'm experiencing domestic and family violence, yes, I'm having thoughts of suicide, they know what the questions are to follow up from that, and they know how to refer them on appropriately to that next service.
Oh, sorry.
We're fighting over the microphone again, Brett.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. We've got lots of questions.
It is something, in some ways it's unfortunate that your organisation has to exist, because we know there's significant underfunding in terms of mental health right across Australia from government. But it puts the pressure on in terms of you needing to raise the funds to be able to keep the organisation going. But you provide that vital service, and especially in these days, I guess, of people have lifestyle has become more isolated in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And the ability to reach out locally is very important.
Yeah, that's right, Keith. And I joined Lifeline Loddon Mallee in the middle of COVID. And the first year I was there, we answered just under 10,000 calls. So last year we answered 22,000 calls. So people are knowing it's okay not to be okay, and they're reaching out long before they have those thoughts of suicide. Do we still support people who are having thoughts of suicide? Absolutely, we do. But we also support people who are experiencing any kind of mental health crisis or distress. So, and we actually support people who are trying to support people who are in crisis or having thoughts of suicide as well. And that's the one thing, Lifeline's there for all. And if you're trying to support someone, sometimes speaking to someone who's skilled and is non-judgmental and is just there to provide you some perspective and some connection can really give you a path forward to better support maybe your teenager, maybe, your elderly parent, who knows? Certainly what we know is the largest cohort of deaths by suicide in Australia are 15 to 44-year-old men and then over 65-year-old men. But we want to support all. So, and to touch on the funding piece, Keith, you're absolutely right. Let's be honest. Governments are struggling to continue the level of funding that they would like to. We do get some funding from the Victorian government, for which we are very grateful. However, about 75% of all the money our centre needs every year we have to raise ourselves. John is key to that fundraising strategy, and we've opened our own social enterprise in Long Gully, our thrift store, which also enables us to generate some revenue that we've got control over. But that absolutely is the biggest challenge. And having to put resources in to generate money does take resources away from being able to recruit and train more volunteers.
Yeah. How important is it to actually have the local focus, rather than it just being a big call centre in Melbourne where you're talking to someone, say you've got someone from a remote area who's calling in, someone necessarily living in Melbourne wouldn't understand the same issues. So how important is it to have that local focus to your call centre or your volunteers?
Look, I think there's a couple of things. So one, being part of the National Lifeline, absolutely people from remote areas might speak to someone in Melbourne. But the training that all of our volunteers undertake isn't necessarily about trying to solve that person's problem or fix that person's problem. It's about creating connection and reaffirming with them what they've got and what strategies they can tap into immediately, so when they hang up that phone, they can continue on with their day. But absolutely having people locally, the far biggest benefit is the skills they then take back out into our community. Yeah. The number of our volunteers who say they get more out of volunteering than they feel that they give, that they now have skills to talk to their grandchildren that they didn't have before, to have the uncomfortable conversation with a friend, a neighbour, a family member when they're concerned, and then knowing how to refer them on and to support them to get them to that professional help. The number of stories that have been life-changing as a result of having volunteers in our community with those skills. And in Bendigo, our call centre's been operating for 30 years. We currently have, I think, 76 active volunteers here in Bendigo, but that ebbs and flows and people come and go. And I couldn't even estimate how many people we've got in the community who have undertaken the Lifeline training at some point in the last 30 years. For every person who undertakes that training, approximately 60 local community members receive benefit from that training at some point, whether it's checking in on someone, whether it's able to have a conversation that you weren't skilled to have before, maybe it's picking up on cues, all of that kind of stuff. So definitely for us in our communities where the call centres are, the benefit is that ripple effect, that the skills that get taken back out into the community and the support that's available. But not just that, it's our volunteers connect people with the training that we offer, so therefore we're able to build more skills again. So that's definitely one of the biggest benefits. And understanding the nuances of regional and rural Australia, whether it's Victoria regional or Western New South Wales regional, there are always similarities. So being able to provide that connection really helps.
Yeah, similarities in the medical side of it. You think of all the nurses, paramedics, doctors and like that are out there in our community that are doing a lot of this work outside of their regular work hours anyway, like the CPR training and all that these people have got. Having come from that field myself, I know that there is a level of expectation then when you're out there and you have those skills that you can inject in the community, not just while you're on shift. So you take that with you.
That's exactly right. And I mean, you know, different volunteers are interested in doing different things. Some of them advocate for what we're doing, you know, join us at events to advocate for more funding. They're ambassadors within the community, you know, the business community, to talk about what we're doing and why we need their support and how their business actually benefits from that. So, you know, we're really lucky that we've got a full range of volunteers who are willing to, you know, use the skills that they've got outside of crisis support to support our organisation as well.
We might... you got a question now, Keith? Or are you just mulling over something in your head? I can see you got your thinking.
Always mulling over
on
things, Brad. But a lot of communities too, and I guess what we might see is some of the, you know, cause and effect around these things. You and I, Lisa, we worked in the community development space together, but we know that a lot of the smaller communities, things like the local sporting clubs and that, used to be very important places because it's where Joe learnt to care about Bob up the road. And they would come together and they could have conversations, even if they weren't talking directly about issues.
Yes.
They had someone they knew that the community cared. And the loss of a lot of those sporting clubs has been part of the impact on especially those smaller communities. They're the ones who lost the footy club, the netball club, the tennis club.
Yeah.
They've gone to the next town over, and then even those have amalgamated into another town.
Yeah, it's so
and
true.
so people become less connected within their community, and that's where... To me, I see that as part of the rise of the demand for your services comes from that. And I guess it's part of the unavoidable change in communities that we see.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, you know, as you said, in our work in community development, we've been seeing it for the last decade. Yeah. You know, it's the same 20 or 40 people in a community who are volunteering at the CFA, at the SES. They're members of council. They're running the CWA. You know, and of course, then it becomes a level of burnout. And as those volunteers age, there aren't necessarily young people who are either stepping up or young people in the community who are rising up through the ranks to take on those roles. So, you know, then you're starting to see the folding of you know, football clubs is a good example because we need young people to play. And you're right, that's absolutely why we're seeing an increase. And that's why when I joined the organisation 4 years ago, the board made a really clear distinction. We are Lifeline Loddon Mallee, and predominantly for a long period of time we had been Bendigo-centric, focused on the call centre only. And so we made a really distinct and committed direction to broaden our reach, hence why we now have established a call centre in Mildura, so we have volunteers up there. We make sure that we don't just deliver training in the two large towns in the catchment. Next week we're going to deliver training in Robinvale, Swan Hill. Soon we'll be delivering training in Kerrang, Quambatook, Kahuna. So really trying to, and yes, you don't get 30 people at training in those communities, but the people that you get there are well connected and want to do good for their community, and they take those skills back out into their community. Places like neighbourhood houses and local food hubs are becoming more and more important as a result of less volunteers on the ground and, like you said, the loss of or amalgamation of football netball clubs, you know, maybe the local even SES, depending on what's happening. So, yeah, that absolutely is what we're seeing in our work as well on the ground.
Yeah, it feels like something we're talking about quite often, Keith, is that importance of being engaged in something. You know, we talk to a lot of these organisations and it's just that flow-on effect of people being involved with it that is somehow, you know, you get as much back as you put into it. And Phoenix being a community radio station is very similar in that as well, that it creates its own little community that supports one another and the like. People that may not necessarily have tapped into some of the other services, but for whatever reason they're interested in radio, and that creates a bit of a community for them as well. They feel supported.
That's right. And, we have lots of volunteers who do the same shift together every week because they want to be, they're not even necessarily talking to each other than maybe a cuppa, in between calls, but that connection. And, we're always looking for more volunteers. It's a really big commitment because we have to train you in a nationally accredited model. It's about 18 weeks of e-learning, classroom-style learning before you even get on the phones to be coached. So it is a significant commitment, but the skills and learning that you get from that is huge. And we've got our next cohort of volunteers will be starting in mid-November. So anyone who's out there listening who's interested should go to our website. It's lifelinelm.org.au, and we've got heaps of information. It even breaks down exactly what you'll be learning about, what the national accreditation is. Always looking for more volunteers. It's a massive commitment. So we're really lucky and proud to have so many volunteers.
We might, and obviously we'll chat with John quite a bit about the fundraising side of it and some stuff that's coming up. We'll listen to a couple of tracks soon, then now, and we'll come back and talk about that. The first one I thought was appropriate. We're going back a little bit, 1983. Keith, you'll like this one.
Why do you always look at me when you play old songs?
I know why.
Yeah. I think everyone in Bendigo knows why, Keith. That's no secret. We're going to have a listen to Real Life and Send Me an Angel.
The Heartland album. Yes.
All right. You're listening to The Phatt on Phoenix FM, and we're talking to John and Lisa from Lifeline. This is Real Life with Send Me an Angel. Phoenix FM, and you're tuned into The Phatt. The last song we heard was Need a Cuddle.
The last sang.
We were just talking off air about how Keith likes to have a crack when I misspeak. Claire Cowley with her song Need a Cuddle. It also felt appropriate while we're talking about Lifeline and all the great work that it does. Now, John, that work can't happen without people like you in the background raising money. Tell us about the importance of the fundraising for Lifeline.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting thing when I joined. I've only been with Lifeline Loddon Mallee for a year now. So when I came in, like most people, I think, Lifeline is such a huge name and it's such a recognised and respected organisation that I assumed it was properly funded. And I think we're all a bit shocked, like Lisa said before, that we actually have to raise 3/4 of the money just to keep our centre and our phone lines going, which I did not expect. You kind of think it's going to be one of those because that's not the bit you're scrabbling for. And all the Lifeline centres pretty much have to do that. So that is kind of slightly terrifying, but obviously that's the thing where everyone I mention it to is always a bit shocked as well. Like you just think that searching for pennies is not what Lifeline should be doing. Yeah. But we do. And, and there is amazing support, obviously, for people because of the organisation and what we do. And, there's all these incredible things. So September is our Hello for Hope month, where we have a lot of different events. The goal is, because we're such a small centre, to try and get other people who can run events. And then, we all benefit from those. And of course, I'm here at the moment to talk about the comedy night, which is on tomorrow night, because when you think Lifeline, you think comedy. Yeah. That's the thing too. Sometimes, you kind of, because of what we do is so serious, people often, I think, don't kind of, think of the great ways we can make money includes things like we have a cat competition, an online cat competition we've just kicked off. We have the Lifeline. Domino's is doing sort of $1 from each pizza on Friday, and they've asked us to decorate one of the stores, so we've got a Dalek that we're putting into the Bendigo store. Okay. So go get a selfie with a Dalek and buy a pizza. So at the moment, the whole thing is, how do we work with the community? What can we do? And how can we find just those extra dollars? It costs us $39 to answer a phone call effectively. So the good thing is that if someone donates $39, that could be the phone call that saves someone's life. And there is no small amount of money for us. It's not like we go, oh, that's not 10 grand, I'm not taking that. It's like, we're more than happy to people run those events and give us those small donations.
I think it's something that people don't realise is it actually costs money to put these things together, like just the fact that you've even got a building and the insurance that comes with that.
Yeah, and just having the lights on, the power, the cost of that. And of course you don't think about that. It's the same as when you buy a cup of coffee, you never really think about beyond the liquid in the cup.
Yeah,
What's all the other stuff you're paying for? And that's the same thing with our phone calls. And our crisis consultants are volunteers. But so this is always happening behind me in the studio. But it still costs money to train our crisis consultants. So that's $3,500 just to train one of those people to answer those calls. So this is the bit where basically every September we go out and we go, hey, how can you help us out? What can you do? And I talked to the boys at the Comedy Vic and the Bendigo Comedy Festival, which is an amazing festival and it's coming up, and I'm so impressed with what they do. And they said, oh yeah, we'll do this Laugh a Lifeline comedy gala. And then they managed to add 2 more gigs onto it. So it's a tour now. So it's on in Bendigo tomorrow. It's in Melbourne on Friday. And then it's in, I think, Ballarat next week. So yeah, I mean, they're just incredible. You just sort of wind them up and they just make amazing things happen. So yeah, tomorrow night at Piano Bar. And Tommy DeSalo and Brett Blake are both coming from Melbourne. They're quite big names. You might have seen them on things like Have You Been Paying Attention and the Comedy Gala. And then also some of our local comedians like Ash Grebo, Luke Morris and Robin Reynolds. It's going to be a fantastic night. Yeah. And if I can go a bit nerdy about comedy for a moment, this is probably going way too much into comedy because I've been a comedy observer for many, many years now. One of the things I really like about the Bendigo Comedy Festival and comedy in general is that these guys, and in a lot of cases it still is guys, unfortunately, but these guys are willing to talk about mental health. Yeah. Like, it's really great that people will talk about having depression, having ADHD, getting counselling, and it's just fantastic because it makes it so accessible for everybody. It's like they just talk about it as an everyday part of life, which it is, and that just means it's easier, I think, for other people to go, oh well, obviously getting counselling isn't a big thing. I don't have to freak out about getting counselling, or I can talk about my mental health. And I've just been so impressed over the years watching as comedy in general has shifted away from making that weird and creepy into a thing of, let's all talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. And look, we know a lot of people in the performing arts world. They do tend to be wired a bit differently, and they're people who tend to be susceptible to those sort of things.
Absolutely,
And, people don't think of comedians as performing artists. That's what they are. For them to speak freely about those sort of things and to put a focus on it, I think it's good.
Yeah, and you actually read the neurodivergent sort of side of, especially music, especially comedy, and particularly with comedy, I think it's the fast reactions of comedians. So if you watch one of those panel shows like QI or something, the way that people can just come up with a really intelligent callback or a smart pun on something, and that's because that's how their brains are working. So it's actually a bit of a superpower in that sense. That it's allowing the brain to create these things. But there are downsides as well, and that's when it's always perfectly acceptable to get help and to talk to people. Especially like Lifeline.
Absolutely.
A superpower that we don't have, Keith.
No. Unlike, we have had a conversation in the past about Brett thought he had a superpower when he was young. We won't go into it now. But he thought he was immune to snake bites.
And then you got bitten by a snake and it wasn't
No, I got bitten by a snake, which caused the immunity.
Oh,
yeah, but he thought he was immune to every snake after that. But anyway.
I didn't get bitten again, so all good.
Yes. But you've also done a big bike ride recently.
Yeah, Luke Baker, who I think you had on the show a couple of weeks ago. Luke is amazing. He was riding 3,000, and this is the number I'm supposed to remember. 3,249? Yeah, 3,249 kilometres. He came to us to say, I want to do this fundraising bike ride for mental health and suicide awareness, and I just want to know how many people died by suicide in the previous year. And it was interesting because those numbers aren't necessarily that easy to get.
No.
And so at that time I had to wait for this number to come out. So that was the number in 2022 of people who died in Australia by suicide. So he wanted to ride 1 kilometre per person to remember them and honour them. The thing that happened, though, he did ride that number of Ks. It did happen. But the goal was to ride from Albany in Western Australia back to Bendigo, which is basically the only straight line that's all on land for that number of Ks in Australia. And things just kept going wrong. The gods of biking were thwarting him at every step. And his first bike got stolen. The crew was coming over on, was it Rex Airlines that then collapsed?
Yes.
So an airline went down. The support vehicle broke down twice on the way to Albany. They got to Albany and then got told there is no way we can guarantee that this vehicle won't basically, you might die on the Nullarbor, was what he was told in Albany. So
of all places.
So, I mean, he actually did some interviews in Albany, which I think is hilarious. And then he came back. And so he did the whole thing sort of around Victoria, which in some ways was great because we got him to go up to Mildura, which is where the call centre is, and meet the volunteers. But I mean, it was just such an incredible achievement, an exhausting thing. He put so much work into it. And I mean, going back to the money side of it too, that's the thing about it. It always feels like we're fighting for every dollar at the moment. Like, it's not that people aren't generous. People are just feeling a bit nervous and cash strapped. So, he's made nearly 10 grand, which is amazing, but it's so much work, for that 10 grand. And we were talking about, even to get those $39 to answer one phone call, it just can feel at the moment quite difficult. So we're very much trying to find ways that we can help businesses and organizations. There's certain, tax benefits if you donate to us. So we're doing everything we can, but, people like Luke are just astonishing. They're just amazing people. And Luke has that great thing of he can tell his story, which is really moving, and he can tell you about how he got help and how to get help. And also that thing, as Lisa mentioned before, it is really men. It's heterosexual men of certain ages that we really need just to reach out and just know it's okay to reach out. That's the thing. I think we all get taught it's not okay to ask for help, which is the most stupid thing to tell anyone. It's like it's you wouldn't try and, fix your computer by yourself if you didn't know anything about computers. You'd call someone in. We get other people to fix
it's not going to end well.
Exactly. All sorts of things we go, I'll get someone to fix that who knows what they're doing. Yeah. But when it's our brains, we go, oh, no, it's I've just got to sit here and be fine with it. So Luke is so good at being able to connect, with true blue blokes and let them know about the kind of help services that are out there for them.
There's clearly a link between the comedy and the work he's doing too, because it sounds like his attempt at that has almost turned into a comedy routine.
It did get a bit much. It was, and poor Luke, it was like, oh, what's happened now? It was like just the poor guy has put all this effort in, and it's like, oh, Luke.
I think he had the Shakespeare play out.
He did have a comedy of errors. It was just hilarious every time we go, oh, now this has happened. So we're so proud of Luke, and we're so happy and so thrilled that he did this for us, and so grateful. But also with Luke, it's about communication, and that's the same thing with the comedy night. It's about communicating. So it's just about being open and honest about who you are and how you feel, and there are resources out there to help you.
I think connections that you create through this as well, and we see it quite a bit in the music scene, that the support networks that then become in place just from going out and spending time with people.
Absolutely. And I mean, even talking about the comedy night tomorrow night, I did do a bit of Googling, and there is a lot of scientific research that shows that laughing is actually good for mental health. And there's a fair amount saying that even just being out in a crowd can be really helpful, just to get out of your house and just be amongst other people. So, definitely, if you go down to the woods, if you go down to Piano Bar tomorrow night, so Thursday night, kicking off at 7:30 p.m., you'll have this chance of, you'll have a great night, you'll have a great laugh, it'll make you feel better, and then the money will come back to help Lifeline. So it's kind of win-win for everyone.
Yeah,
definitely.
Perfect. We know that, shared experience are the things that stay with you.
Yep.
But they are things that make you feel better.
Yes, experiences rather than products. Because, I mean, there's that famous meme that's got the therapist says, and what do we do when we feel sad? Add to cart. And that's the thing. And I very much understand that. But, that 3 seconds of dopamine for when your Amazon order shows up is not the same as, like you're saying, a shared experience will actually lift you for a lot longer.
Yeah. And that's what we say about live music, the fact that what you're seeing is a one-off thing. The same with the comedy. That will be a one-off gig for each of those comedians. They might be saying lines that they've known before, but the way they react, the way the crowd reacts, it creates a one-off situation. So everyone there will experience it in their own unique way.
Yes.
But it becomes something that, lives.
Also, I mean, music and comedy too, they're quite visceral in that they're really, like, if you go and see a film, for example, you know, that's amazing, but there's all sorts of bits and pieces in a film and you might enjoy one bit and not the other bit. But with, you know, music, it either just hits you emotionally. Yeah. And with comedy, you know, you laugh or you don't laugh. Like, so these things are, there's no sophisticated part of your brain going, yes, I appreciate how that joke was constructed. Like, you know, it's, you know, you just react. And that's the great thing about it, is that it allows your emotions to just come out and just, you know, be free.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to focus on this stuff. Look, we were heading down a path before COVID of so many people's interactions being through social media and we lost the ability, and certainly for a lot of younger people, to actually have real relationships because everything became on social media. And then COVID just magnified that in such a huge way. And now there's this time where we need to actually get back to, hey, actually building proper relationships that aren't based on social media or memes and all that sort of thing.
And also, if you've got, I mentioned ADHD before, I too have ADHD, like almost everyone now. But that thing where, you know, I when we went into COVID times and everyone was doing those performances via, you know, but I couldn't, they don't connect to me. I cannot watch them. If I sit down in front of my computer to try and watch, you know, a concert, I'm going to end up getting up and doing the dishes. Like it just, and you know, and we're seeing things like universities. University of Adelaide now says it's not going to do live lectures. It's all going to be, you know, via digital, which is going to be terrible for ADHD students because they need to be in a place with a person in front of them to make sure they actually, but also to make sure they actually show up and sit through the whole thing. So, so I think, there is something really exciting about, especially with comedy. I mean, I love watching comedy on telly as well. I love watching the Melbourne Comedy Gala on the ABC and all that kind of stuff. But there is something, like you're saying, about when you're there and present, because you do become in some ways part of the performance. It's really interesting with comedians where they say the same joke can work differently in different times. Sometimes the audience has worked out the end of the joke way earlier than they expect and they start laughing and they go, oh, actually, you already know where I'm going with that. It's really interesting to see that. It is in a way like music. It's like a sort of call and response thing going on. So I think tomorrow night's going to be an amazing night. And Piano Bar is a great venue for comedy, with the one exception of there's a couple of weird pillars in there that the comedians will almost certainly make comment on. But it's a really good space. I've seen comedy there before.
We had a recent live music event up there for the first time in years. That some of the heavy bands in town played up there, and we were talking about the fact that it's like our own corner hotel. If people know the Corner Hotel in Richmond, the famous pole in the Corner Hotel, well, we've got our own versions up there.
Just to be self-indulgent, I've played the Corner Hotel in Richmond because the band booker got confused and thought we were much more popular than we were. And I think they had my band mixed up with someone else's band, and we went on to about 20 people in an enormous space.
Yes, but you can always say we played the Corner Hotel.
That's true.
I would love to put that on my CV.
All right, we'll listen to a track, then we'll come back and chat a little bit more and then wrap things up. We're not far off finishing the show, unless you guys have to run away straight away, or no? We'll play one track. All right, we're going to have a listen to the Black Sorrows and the Chosen Ones. You're listening to The Phatt on Phoenix FM, the voice of your community. We're chatting with Lifeline today. We've got John and Lisa here. Stay with us. We'll hear some more. Phoenix FM, and you're tuned in to The Phatt. We have Lisa and John here. John, you just told us a story. I think we were off air when you told us about the Corner Hotel, or was that on air?
Oh, no, I think that was on air. I think I was showing off on air.
It was.
I think I was showing off both that I'd done the Corner, but also I'm unpopular. So, how that works out in the long run.
Exactly.
The two sides balance each other.
Yeah. Well, and you've been on this side of the desk too. You were just saying you did a radio show.
I've done paneling back in, years ago, I did some stuff at Triple R for a long time, which I really loved. And I did a podcast also, which we recorded at Triple R because Triple R didn't actually know we were doing that. That was always hilarious because it was one of those, the guy who has the van. So one of us did do work at Triple R.
Yeah.
And it was great because you could always tell the guests to come to Triple R, which made it look really impressive without Triple R ever actually quite knowing that we were there and using their studios equipment. But yeah, I used to do some of the paneling, which is pressing all the buttons, which Brett is doing. And I hated it because you try and be really slick and do the whole, and now coming up next, it's real life with Simian Angel. And you'd press the button and nothing would happen. Or you'd press the wrong button, or
Oh, yeah. I'm good at that.
Definitely happened, I can assure you.
Well, you would relate to this, John. Last week when we started, and this happened twice now on 2 different shows, but last week when we started, there was an 11-second delay. So I would speak, and then I would hear myself speaking back to me 11 seconds
that's not
later.
Good.
It was quite freaky.
There are actually mental health conditions that do that. So that's not something you want to
Yeah, we didn't last long before we put some songs on and tried to fix it. Yeah, challenging. But anyway, you've been on this side, so you know how it is. But
you sympathise. I don't.
He just hangs it on me. Yeah.
It's easy. Doesn't look hard. It's a couple of buttons.
Yeah, sits over there with his arms folded. He has copped some criticism from his other half, though, that he needs to get on this side of the desk, and he's got no closer since.
I'm with you. Avoid the buttons. The buttons are bad. Nothing good comes from the buttons.
I selected the chair the furthest away from me. Make sure there's no fear in me getting there.
Yes. So, yeah, look, such a wonderful thing, Lifeline, obviously, and as you say, 22,000 calls a year. That's quite staggering.
Yeah.
It probably goes back a little bit.
Sorry, Brad, I just want to point out to make that clear. That's 20,000 calls we answered in Mildura and Bendigo. Like the number of calls coming into the
Lifeline network.
1114 number would be what kind of number?
1.3 million last year.
Wow.
Nationally.
And it's funny because something that you said before was that, ideally we are working so that Lifeline won't exist anymore.
Yes.
I mean, that's our ultimate goal.
Right.
Yeah, is to basically create an Australia where we're no longer needed.
Yeah, not going to happen though, is it? We're always going to need these services, and we need those connections as well. And it's something we're really strong about here at the Phatt, is about building those connections amongst all those groups that are out there trying to support the community. Because there is a lot.
So there's the comedy gala tomorrow night, so people can get tickets still.
Yep, they can buy tickets right now or at the door. But please come along. Just Google Lifeline Loddon Mallee. You'll find we have a dedicated Hello for Hope page, which has all our events on it.
Excellent.
But Google away. You'll find all the things.
Yeah. And there's also a cat competition.
The cat competition, which this is actually a little bit of an experiment this year. So we're just, we've done a soft launch for it. This is probably the first place we've ever talked about it. We're doing a cat competition. Because previously to being at Lifeline, I worked on Pride. We always had a dog show every year, and I always said I wanted to have a cat show, because cats, though, obviously don't want to go out. They don't want to leave the house. The whole point of a cat is it judges you. You don't judge it. So we tried to work out a way of doing it electronically, and thanks to Sam and Quinn at Pride, we worked out a way of doing it. So this is a reinterpretation of that being done with our colleague Jill. Excellent. And the idea is that basically you register your cat, and then people vote for your cat through throwing dollars at it. It's a bit like your cat's a stripper, really. And there is an amazing prize, though, which we just managed to clarify. So Raven Jane, amazing local artist. Some of you will have seen Raven's work in billboards and things as well as in galleries. But Raven will be doing, the winning cat will get a portrait by Raven Jane of the cat. So the photo you put in, Raven will be turning into an original one-off artwork piece.
Excellent.
Which you will get to treasure forever, and she's such a good artist that I kind of want to win. But so that's also up and running. So again, if you go to Lifeline Loddon Mallee, Hello for Hope, you'll be able to find that. We'll do a big push for that on our social medias as well, and that's going to be running till the end of September.
Might get some crazy cat ladies from the US.
That would be great. Please come on up. Yeah.
Or crazy cat Keith.
Yeah.
You got a couple of cats, haven't you?
Yes, I can see Lionel and Ricky putting entries in for this. They'll insist.
Yes.
They see themselves as photogenic, so yes. And we have hundreds of photos of the cats. So
Sure, most of my phone is just pictures of my cat.
Oh, that's
cool.
great.
All right.
I appreciate your time and coming in and talking to us, but we also very much appreciate the work that Lifeline Loddon Mallee do as part of the Lifeline network. And yes, we'll start a separate conversation around another fundraising